French presidents don't attend practice sessions. That doesn't actually occur. They go to the finals, give awards, wave to the cameras from the presidential box, and then depart. That is the custom, that is the protocol, and that is how it has always operated. Therefore, nobody was entirely sure what to make of Emmanuel Macron's unexpected arrival at Roland Garros on May 18, 2026, accompanied by a covert security detail and explicit orders to keep the media away. The competition was still in its early stages. May 24th was the scheduled start date of the main draw. Qualifiers and early practice sessions were taking place on the grounds, creating the kind of subdued vibe that precedes the actual storm. And yet there he was, the French president, sitting in the first row of Philippe Chatria's court, silently observing a 20-year-old from Manila swing a racket. No crowds. No flags. Don't chant. Just the sound of the ball striking the clay, and one of the strongest men on the planet leaning forward in his chair, motionless and totally intent, observing Alex as if he had nowhere else to be. It was already one of the most amazing moments the French Open had ever produced before anyone even realized it had happened, before the cameras recorded it and the internet learned about it. And that was only the start. You have to go back a few weeks and trace Macron's path to that courtside position in order to comprehend why this hit the way it did. After a run in Rome that had accomplished something out of the ordinary that tennis rankings and match results don't adequately reflect, Alex had traveled to Paris. At the Italian Open, she defeated Magdalena Frech and Wang Xinyu, advanced to the third round, and challenged world number 2 Elena Rybakina before losing a match that was the focus of the tennis world for days. A third-round exit doesn't seem like much on paper. However, what transpired during those games, in the stands, outside the stadium, and on social media, was quite different. There was an unprecedented influx of Philippine flags at the Foro Italico. Laban Alex's chant reverberated off walls that had stood there for decades without ever hearing anything like it. Because of her, people who had never watched a WTA match were doing so. Celebrities were present. Dignitaries arrived. The story went well beyond the sports pages and into discussions about identity, community, and what it means when someone from your nation takes the stage and doesn't back down. Alex was more than simply a rising star by the time the French Open preparations got underway. She had momentum behind her and was a phenomenon. And in some way, the Élysée Palace was reached by that impetus. It seems that Macron had been keeping up with the coverage. The pieces on what Alex represented to a group of workers dispersed around Europe who had spent years being virtually unseen in the nations they had helped build, the videos from Rome, and the news about the Filipino diaspora appearing in great numbers. He had witnessed it. He'd read it. And even if it meant witnessing a practice session by himself in an empty stadium before the competition began, he had made up his mind to see it for himself. When you sit with that image, there's something almost poetic about it. The stands were empty, the nets were tight, the lines were clear, and the clay had just been rolled. And this one man in the front row, who could have been anywhere in France that morning, and is in charge of a nation with 68 million citizens and 100 crises vying for his attention, choose to watch a Filipino tennis player train for a Grand Slam for an hour. What does that reveal about the kind of self-centeredness Alex had developed prior to hitting a single competitive ball in Paris? Nearly an hour passed during the practice session. The officials in attendance said Macron hardly moved. He didn't look at his phone. Instead of turning to whisper to his aides every few minutes, as individuals do when they're somewhere out of duty rather than true interest, he did not. He did nothing except observe. Her movement between drills, her ground strokes, her footwork, and her intensity, even when no one was keeping score. He eventually leaned over to speak discreetly to a tournament official standing next to him. The official gave a nod. Unaware of any of this, Alex began packing her suitcase as the session came to a conclusion. Her thoughts were already focused on the next training block, the next tactical discussion with her coaches, and the 1,000 little tweaks that go into getting ready for a Grand Slam. She didn't know. Not even close to a concept. The French president then began to approach her. People who witnessed what transpired over the next few minutes, as well as authorities and security officers who subsequently discussed it in cautious, oblique language, provide accounts of what transpired. When Alex looked up from her luggage, she saw a man who she instantly recognized. Her expression of astonishment seemed to be quite striking. She has previously met celebrities. When you lay it all out, the list is truly remarkable. Totti, Francesco, Bocelli, Andrea, Rossi Valentino, Kim Kardashian, Elon Musk, Swift, Taylor. Everyone around her was impressed by her calm demeanor, even though she had been in rooms with all of those individuals. However, this was not the same. She was going to compete in a competition with the nation's head of state. This was Emmanuel Macron telling her it was a pleasure to meet her on the Roland Garros clay. In order to get through the next few minutes, she had to find a whole new gear, regardless of the calm she had going into the situation. It seems that Macron was the first to discuss what he had just witnessed. He informed her that France took athletic greatness seriously at all levels, that he had witnessed many sportsmen train over the years, and that it came with a job. However, he said that his arrival at Roland Garros that morning had nothing to do with the preparation he had just witnessed. Since the footage from Rome had entered his mind, he had been attempting to comprehend what had brought him. He discussed the Filipino population in France, regarding the nurses who had endured the pandemic with little acknowledgement, about the elderly French folks who were cared for in towns and cities all around the nation, about the engineers, laborers, and people who had left their homes, families, and familiar surroundings to start new lives in a nation that didn't always accommodate them in its narrative. And he informed what those throngs stood for. He discussed France's own immigration policy and the workers who came from all over the world, settled here, and contributed their years and labor without always receiving credit. He made a clear connection between the two items, Alex and the unseen individuals she had brought to light. After then, he announced the news. A program of cultural interaction between France and the Philippines would be established by the French government. The amount of money would be 750,000 euros. Additionally, it would be founded under Alex's name. Everyone in the room gasped. That isn't a dramatic embellishment or a figure of speech for YouTube. The entire room let out a gasp. Because no one in that room had anticipated it. Not the reporters, not the WTA representatives in the front rows, and not the tournament organizers, who had been informed of the program for the press conference and had nothing like this on it. 750,000 euros. Under the name of a participant who had not yet participated in a tournament match. In honor of a 38th ranked player worldwide. Not due to titles. Not because of awards. Because of the significance she had for others. Because she had become a movement without ever intending to be one. After the announcement, the WTA officials in that room reportedly sat motionless for a few seconds. Afterwards, one of them was overheard saying something like, "We've been measuring the wrong things." This is a really startling revelation from people whose whole career revolves around measurement. The parameters used to evaluate everything in professional tennis include rankings, prize money, and television ratings. And here was the president of France stating that a player could be more significant than her ranking indicated, more important than her performance indicated, and deserving of recognition before she had even competed because the impact she had already made existed in a dimension that the sport's standard measuring instruments just couldn't reach. It was truly remarkable to receive that acknowledgement from that person on that day, from that podium. Heads of state had previously attended WTA tournaments. They have witnessed politicians using the French Open as a setting for diplomatic handshakes and picture ops. However, this was unlike anything they had ever seen. Before the competition ever started, an announcement was made to commemorate what a player had previously done for those in need, rather than to congratulate a winner. Even the most popular tennis moments seldom keep up with the speed at which the story spread. It had reached every Filipino community between Paris and Manila in a matter of hours. In a break room in Lyon, a caregiver named Maria, who had spent 12 years in France and had sent money home for so many birthdays, deaths, and Christmases that she had stopped counting, watched the video on her phone and started crying like she hadn't in a long time. It wasn't the money, she later claimed, and it wasn't even directly Alex. It was the sensation of having a name. Of having a French president stand at a podium and explain her life, the sacrifice, the distance, the invisibility, and relate it to something that the entire world was witnessing. A tennis match cannot create the feeling of being noticed after years of being invisible. Only when an athlete develops into something more than an athlete does that occur. Their narrative serves as a vehicle for the narratives of others. Perhaps more than anyone in her immediate vicinity, Alex has always known this. In interviews, she has discussed the significance of the fans to her, the weight she feels when she sees the flags and hears the screaming, and how, despite the fact that her name is the only one on the score, she is playing for more than just herself. However, living through a situation like that press conference and comprehending something in the abstract are two completely different experiences. A few Filipino supporters who had congregated close to Roland Garros remained outside after Macron departed, the cameras stopped filming, and the officials withdrew to gather their thoughts. They had arrived because people in the community had heard that something important was taking place. They each had a flag. They were reciting chants. And Alex approached them as he left the stadium. She went directly to the fans after passing her mother, her coaches, and the security detail. She didn't follow a script when she spoke to them during those brief moments. There was no communications team involved, no well-crafted message, and no previously workshopped and approved version of this. She merely spoke. She expressed gratitude to them for coming to Rome both when she was winning and when she was losing, adding that she would always remember the difference between the two. The grant Macron had declared was not hers, she informed them. She was just the name attached to it because she happened to be the one holding a racket on a clay court in front of the cameras. She claimed that it belonged to every Filipino child who had a dream bigger than their current circumstances, that it belonged to every WFW who had sacrificed years of their life so their family could have a future, and that it was a recognition of all of them. Then she said the thing that went viral throughout the entire day. She hadn't won a single match at Roland Garros yet, that she honestly didn't know what would happen and that she wasn't going to pretending otherwise. However, she assured them that no matter what, she would fight, never give up, and bring each and every one of them onto the court. Alex Laban. Waves of the chant returned to her. Her fist went up. The flags fluttered. And something happened outside Roland Garros that had nothing to do with tennis and everything to do with the significance of the sport. One version of Alex's story is simple to recount. Exciting game, huge attendance, young player, and improving rankings. That version is accurate and would make a compelling feature. However, it ignores the real issue at hand, which is more crucial to comprehend and more difficult to describe. Through her style of play, her demeanor, and the community she has created around her involvement in the sport, Alex has given people who don't often see themselves in professional tennis a reason to feel like it belongs to them as well. For many years, the WTA has been a worldwide organization. Players come from all over the world. How?